Picture this. Northern Ethiopia, roughly 3.4 million years ago. Hot, dry, the grass the color of old bone. A small group of creatures is moving across the landscape on two legs, but not quite the way you do it. Shorter, hunched, brains about a third the size of yours. These aren't humans, not even close, yet. They're Australopithecus, the same species as the famous fossil Lucy, and one of them is crouched over a dead antelope, holding a sharp rock, doing something that, as far as anyone can tell, nothing on Earth had ever done before, eating with a tool in its hand. That moment, or something basically identical to it, might be the closest thing we'll ever find to the actual first human meal. Not the first meal ever eaten by Homo sapiens specifically, that's a whole separate rabbit hole. The first meal eaten by anything that kicked off the chain of events that eventually became us. And what was actually on that bone is way weirder than you'd guess. In 2010, a paleoanthropologist named Alemseged was examining a batch of ancient animal bones recovered from Dikika, Ethiopia, not far from where Lucy herself was dug up decades earlier. Under a microscope, those bones told a story nobody was expecting this far back in time. Cut marks. Clean, deliberate lines where a sharp stone had been dragged across bone to strip the meat off, and alongside them, something even more telling. Percussion marks. The kind of blunt, heavy fractures you get from smashing a bone open with serious force. These marks were dated to 3.4 million years ago, which pushed the earliest known evidence of tool-assisted meat-eating back by about 800,000 years overnight. And it did something even weirder to the whole picture. It put this behavior in the hands, sort of a species that existed long before anything resembling our genus, Homo. The first known meal in our story didn't belong to us at all. It belonged to something that came before us, and somehow handed the habit down anyway. So what was actually on the menu out there in the dust 3.4 million years ago? Start with the cut marks, because they tell you meat was still on the bone when someone got to it. But here's the twist. The cut marks alone aren't actually the most interesting part. The percussion marks, the deliberate smashing, point to something else entirely. Marrow. Marrow isn't glamorous. It's the soft, fatty stuff packed inside the hollow core of a bone. And to almost every other animal on that savanna, it was basically impossible to reach. A lion can strip a carcass clean in minutes. A hyena, with one of the strongest bite forces of any mammal alive, can crack a lot of smaller bones without much effort. But a thick femur from something the size of an antelope? That actually beats a hyena's jaw more often than people assume. You need real, directed force at exactly the right angle to crack it open. A sharp rock, swung correctly by a creature patient enough to keep trying, can do what almost nothing else on that landscape could. Which means the first known humanish meal wasn't built around the best cut of the animal. It was built around the one part literally nothing else could get to. And that detail matters way more than it sounds like it should. Marrow and the fatty brain tissue you'd find inside a cracked skull are both packed with exactly the kind of fat a growing brain needs to build itself. Some researchers studying brain evolution think this exact resource, fat almost nothing else could access, may have quietly fed the earliest stages of brain growth in our entire lineage. Before fire, before cooking, before anyone could remotely be called human. So picture the actual meal a bit more fully now. No campfire, no shared plate. A handful of small, slow, weak-jawed creatures crouched around a half-eaten carcass that something faster and meaner had already taken the easy parts from, smashing a rock against bone until it finally cracked, pulling out fat that might have been the single most valuable thing on offer in that whole landscape that day. But here's the thing most people get wrong about this. Meat and marrow were almost certainly the smaller part of the story, not the bigger one. Researchers studying chemical signatures locked inside fossilized teeth, basically a way of reading what someone ate based on isotopes trapped in enamel, have found that early hominins like Lucy's species were eating a ton of tough grasses and sedges, not soft fruit.
Coarse, fibrous, genuinely demanding plant material that took serious effort just to chew down to something swallowable. You can actually see this written directly into the fossil record. The molars from this period are massive by modern standards, flat and thick, clearly built for grinding rather than tearing. The jaw muscles attached to teeth like that would have made hours of non-stop chewing physically doable. because hours of non-stop chewing was simply what eating required back then. So the real picture comes together like this. A meal wasn't one clean event. It was closer to a long, ongoing project that ran through most of the day. Tough plant material chewed for hours just to pull out enough calories. Fruit, when the season cooperated, giving a rare hit of easy sugar. Tubers dug raw out of the ground, starchy and genuinely difficult for any stomach to break down without heat that didn't exist yet. And woven through all of it, opportunities for meat and marrow whenever a carcass turned up, processed fast with whatever was sharp enough to do the job. And none of this happened solo either. A carcass big enough to be worth fighting off hyenas and vultures for wasn't something one creature carried home alone. It was something a small group gathered around together, each one working a different angle. Some stripping meat, some smashing bone, some just waiting their turn at the marrow. Which is, in its own weird way, the oldest version of something you still do without thinking about it. People gathered around food, getting more out of it together than any one of them could alone. Here's the part worth really sitting with, though. There was no fire in this story. None. Which changes everything about how this meal would have actually felt. The meat was raw, tough, and a genuine pain for the body to digest. The plants were coarse, slow to break down, giving up their calories incompletely. If you got dropped into that exact meal right now, you'd probably struggle to even get through it. Every single part of it demanded more from the body than anything cooked ever asks of you, and yet they survived on it. Not just survived, built the foundation of literally everything that eventually became us. The patience to find the right bone, the knowledge of which plants were worth the effort, the simple, repeated, completely unglamorous act of cracking open something nothing else could crack, because somewhere inside it was exactly what they needed. So next time you sit down to eat something soft, something that takes you 30 seconds to chew, something cooked so thoroughly your body barely has to lift a finger for the calories inside it, remember what the very first version of this looked like. A rock, a bone something else had already half-eaten, and the quiet, hard-won knowledge of exactly where the good part was still hiding. That knowledge is older than language, older than fire, probably older than us, and somehow, it's still the reason you're here at all.